It is currently 4:50 a.m., roughly 6 hours or 6.5 hours before the fights are scheduled to kick off, and I am here recording this Bellator 299 podcast for you guys. It's been a long 24 to 48 hours in terms of going through LFA and Bellator for you guys, but I had promised to drop predictions and breakdowns for these cards, and that's exactly what I will deliver on. Obviously, you won't be getting the fancy bells and whistles that you're used to seeing in my MMA Lawcast episodes, as I want to get through these 20 fights that Bellator is showcasing this weekend as efficiently and effectively as possible. I thought I might as well take this opportunity to just quickly show off the MMA Fight Archive, as I'll use it to break down the card. But for those of you guys who've been seeing me plug the MMA Fight Archive the entire time, this is pretty much what you'll be looking at. And here are the upcoming events. Obviously, ACA and LFA went down on Friday. I'll be updating that later today to remove those. But as you can see, we have the full Bellator lineup here with clickable links to every single fighter on this upcoming card. Just give you guys a quick for Luka Poclit. I'll open him up and you guys can see how I have it set up here. Direct links to all of his past fights. You can see it right there. You just click on it and it'll go right there. And then you have all of his Tapology, Sherdog, Instagram, Twitter. If he had a stats page for UFC, MMA decisions page, and best fight odds page as well. So a ton of great content there. Obviously, we have all the UFC upcoming cards, contender series for this coming Tuesday already ready to go. PFL coming up, contender series again, more Bellator, UFC. We have all the UFCs filled out for the rest of the year. As fights get announced, I just quickly update them through here and ensure the links are correct as well. So over 2,300 fighter profiles on there right now, getting close to 60 subscribers on the service as well, and everybody seems to be enjoying it. So why not check it out? 7-day free trial, link available in the description below. Now let's not waste any more time because I am falling asleep over here. Let's get right into the breakdowns for these 20 Bellator fights. First fight up, Chiara Penco going up against Mackenzie Stiller. Penco has a ton of experience over her. She's 8-3 compared to Mackenzie Stiller, who made her professional MMA debut earlier this year when she went out there and defeated Benson Henderson's wife. Her name is escaping me at this moment in time. But she went out there, put her through the ringer. Maria Henderson, that's what it was. Put her to the ringer right away, took her to the ground, and just absolutely smashed her from on top until she was able to get the submission. And I expect her to do the same thing here. Even though Penco has more experience than her, I'm not impressed with the grappling or defensive grappling of Penco, which leads me to believe that Stiller should be able to get this fight to the ground, utilize her purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and get her hand raised inside the distance, I'm thinking by submission. Next up, Mark Ewen going up against Noah Gugnon. Ewen, a very hot prospect that hasn't been talked about a lot, but a guy that's on a solid winning streak, 4-0 right now. Obviously a big favorite at -350, -300. I expect him to be the cleaner, crisper striker in this matchup, and I think the difference maker here is going to be the speed advantage for Ewen. Gugnon is a striker as well, but I think he's going to be he's going to be stumped by the level of striker that he's about to go up against here, and I think that he's going to quickly find out that he fucked up by taking this matchup. So give me Ewen to win this fight by knockout. Next up, we got a heavyweight matchup between Sergey Bilostenniy and Kasim Aras. I'm not a big fan of either guy. Bilostenniy, more of a striker, horrible takedown defense. And then on the flip side, Aras, he's apparently a Olympic wrestling champion or has a wrestling background. I wasn't the most impressed from what I saw in his Bellator debut against Davion Franklin, but I think he'll have an easier time taking down Bilostenniy here. I wouldn't trust a minus 200, minus 250 favorite in Bilostenniy considering the lack of takedown defense he has here. And even though he has a striking advantage here, I think he's going to struggle to keep Aras off of him. And I think we'll see Aras take him to the ground and grind this fight out. So plus 200, not a bad spot. Again, Aras not that great either, but still has the wrestling to give Bilostenniy some issues here. Next up, Nicolo Solli going up against Roman Debienne. I cashed on Debienne last time around when he knocked out Burama Kamara earlier this year in the Bellator cage, but I think he's going to be out of luck here against a guy, Nicolo Solli, who in my opinion is a better technical striker. Debienne is a solid power puncher and he loves to cross the pocket with his power strikes, but I think for the most part we're going to see Solli touch him up from distance, maybe mix in a couple takedowns, but I think we see Solli pick up the win here, and as roughly a plus 105 underdog, I don't think he's a bad spot to take as a, like I said, underdog spot. So give me Solli, and Solli I'm going to say by decision. Next up, we got Kenny Mokhonoana going up against Josh O'Connor. Both these guys are 5-0, but there's a clear discrepancy in terms of the type of competition they've been facing. Josh O'Connor has been facing complete scrubs recently, whereas Kenny Mokhonoana has faced some decent competition, and I believe he's going to have the grappling advantage in this matchup, which will allow him to take this fight to the ground and eventually open up a submission opportunity to submit Josh O'Connor. O'Connor might have the slightly better striking, and he could be the best opponent that Kenny, I'm just going to go with Kenny, has faced to this point in time, but I still think he's going to struggle against the strength and the grappling of Kenny. And I think Kenny gets the win here, like I said, by submission. Next up, Asail Adjoudj going up against Ibrahim Hassan. Hassan, much better than I thought he would be, considering he's a pretty big underdog in this matchup. He's very active with his jiu-jitsu, very good with playing off of his back, and considering that Adjoudj primarily comes from a striking background, and he's been taking a liking to the grappling over his last couple fights, I just don't know if I completely trust him to go out there and strike with Hassan. You might want to test his jiu-jitsu and his wrestling a little bit more, but I don't think that would be the best thing to do against a guy who has as crafty as a jiu-jitsu game as Hassan does. I like Adjoudj here. Minus 310, a little bit too wide for me, but as long as he looks to keep this fight upright, he should be able to touch up Hassan from distance. I don't think he knocks him out. I think he just plays the safe point striking game, keeps this fight in the stand-up realm, and wins this fight by decision. Minus 300, I'll pass though. Next up, Davy Gallen going up against Attila Korkmaz. Korkmaz has a decent mobile striking game where he likes to stay at distance, utilizing his footwork and pot-shotting his opponents, but he has a little bit of a questionable takedown defense game and defensive grappling game. Thus, I'll be leaning with Davy Gallen to go out there, utilize his black belt in judo to take this fight to the ground and dominate Korkmaz from on top. So give me Gallen, and I think Gallen wins by decision. Next up, Brian Moore going up against Otto Rodrigues. I'm leaning Rodrigues here as I feel like he'll have a significant grappling advantage. Brian Moore is a guy who is a solid all-around fighter in regards to the fact that he's a good striker, he's a good grappler. He showcased both of those in his last matchup where he was able to knock his opponent down and showcase solid top pressure against his opponent. However, we've seen when he fights guys that are more refined in a specific realm of MMA, he usually ends up coming up short, and I'm expecting him to come up short in the grappling realm here. So give me Otto Rodrigues to get the takedowns here and grind out Brian Moore en route to a decision victory. Next up, we got Dara Kelly going up against Zeegers. I might be mispronouncing Zeegers' name, but is what it is. Doesn't matter. This fight should end pretty quickly. I'm expecting Queally to get this fight to the ground without much issue, and I think he slices through him like butter and eventually finds a finish within the first 3 minutes of this fight. Zeegers is more of a striker that likes to throw power. Takedown defense is almost non-existent, and then when he gets on the mat, it's going to be difficult for him to deal with a guy who's as aggressive and as cerebral as a guy like Queally. So I fully expect Queally to go out there and get a quick finish in this matchup. I like the under 1.5, but I completely understand why Queally is nearing the minus 2,000 range in this matchup. Next up, we got Hassan Magomedsharipov going up against Pyotr Niedzielski. Hassan obviously is the younger brother of Zabit Magomedsharipov, and he might even end up being the better brother once it's all said and done. I think the advantage that Hassan has over Zabit is a better cardio and gas tank. He's able to go a full 15 minutes without looking like he's dying, and he does a great job in terms of utilizing his flashy and unorthodox striking style to get his takedowns going behind it so that he can be very dominant from that top position. Niedzielski is a solid all-around fighter, but he mismanages his gas tank a lot, which has been the reasoning for his last 2 losses. He has a good striking game, attacks the calf pretty well, and also has some good control from that top position when he's able to get his takedowns. But I think he's going to be far outmatched here by Hassan Magomedsharipov, who should be able to get the takedowns, wear on the gas tank of Niedzielski, and get him out of there probably in the second or third round. Next up, we got a striker versus grappler matchup here between Luka Poclit and Roman Faraldo. Faraldo's looking to bounce back after his first professional loss to Levin Queally, who was able to go out there and utilize a grapple-heavy approach to absolutely shut down Faraldo's striking game. I'm expecting Poclit to do the same thing here, and he might even be able to open up a submission opportunity for himself, especially considering how active he is in terms of looking for submissions. I really like Poclit, and I was very impressed with his last matchup against Oliver Ankamp, and I'm expecting him to showcase just as much, if not more, grappling dominance than what Levin Queally was able to showcase last time. So give me Luka Poclit in the near even mark that he currently sits at. Next up, we got Clarke going up against Gorny. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that first name at 5 a.m. while I'm recording this. But Clarke, one of the top prospects coming out of Dublin, coming out of SPG Ireland. I fully expect him to go out there, drag this fight to the ground pretty quickly, and I think he should be able to grind out Gorny over 15 minutes. Gorny has some decent striking and a decent grappling game of his own, but he's clearly going to be outmatched in the grappling realm here by Clarke, who is an absolute savage when he's able to get his grappling going. So give me Clarke. I'm going to say by decision, although a finish would not surprise me at all. Next up, Charlie Ward going up against Gregory Babene. Very intriguing fight here. Babene's on a, I think, 7-fight winning streak, which has gone for over 9 years. He is just not that active, but when he gets in there, he makes short work of his opponents. It's been over 16 months since we've seen him last compete, but he normally likes to go out there, utilize his big punching power to knock out his opponents, which he was able to do last time around against Mike Shipman, who actually just defeated Charlie Ward with a grapple-heavy approach. But Babene seems to have some issues in his game in terms of his takedown defense. I've seen him get grinded out, but I've also seen him take advantage of the fact that his opponents have gassed out, and he's been able to utilize his finishing ability to get them out of there. But Charlie Ward is a guy that has completely revamped his game, even at 42 years old. He is no longer a guy that goes out there and tries to headhunt and knock his opponents out. If he sees an opportunity to grind his opponents out with grappling, he'll look to go that route as well, and he's been able to successfully do that on numerous occasions and over 15 minutes, showcasing a good gas tank. I think at plus 230, he's not a bad shot as an underdog here, as a guy who's been more active in the cage compared to Babene, and also may be able to retaliate with Babene in terms of the striking round with his own big knockout power. But I think it's ultimately going to come down to Ward changing levels, getting this fight to the ground, and really wearing on Babene, slowing him down, and utilizing that grapple-heavy approach. So at plus 230, I think you could do much worse. So I'm going to take a shot here on Ward as a big underdog to grind out Babene over 15 minutes. Next up, we got Mansour Barnaoui going up against J.J. Wilson, a matchup between two very active submission artists. Barnaoui's 13 of his 20 victories have come by submission, but he's very active once fights hit the mat, utilizing very good reversals when he's on his back, but also seeking finishes no matter where he's at in the fight. His striking game could still use a little bit of work, whereas J.J. Wilson also is a very active jiu-jitsu player off of his back, but in the striking realm is very erratic and wild in terms of trying to close the distance and trying to get his opponents out of there. I think eventually he's going to slip up here and give Barnaoui an opportunity to snatch up his neck and take advantage of the wild and erratic style of Wilson. At minus 250 though, minus 225, I'm okay to pass on this matchup and just sit back and enjoy it because I expect it to finish inside the distance, but I think it's going to be Barnaoui who ends up snatching up the neck of J.J. Wilson and getting his hand raised by submission. Next up, we got Peter Queally going up against Daniel Michelli. Obviously, we know Queally, he's on a bit of a rough stretch right now, 0-3 over his last 3 fights, and he's really not that fighter that a lot of people, kind of thought when he was first bursting onto the scene. He was already a veteran before Conor was, blowing up, and he's mainly known for being Conor's wingman at this point in time. He has some big power in his hands, and he's definitely able to go out there and knock his opponents out, but it's clear that he isn't really capable of getting close to that Bellator title unless they hand it to him on a silver platter. His opponent, Michelli, is a guy that looks to take his opponents to the ground and look for quick finishes. If he's unable to do so, he normally gasses out, allowing his opponents to finish him. I think that Queally might struggle a little bit in the early going to try to stop the takedowns of Michelli, but I think he'll be able to stop the submission attempts, work back to his feet, stuff a couple takedowns, then put the power on Michelli, and eventually knock him out. So I think that Queally, inside the distance, Queally by knockout is probably the way to go, but also the fight doesn't go to decision. Chalk is not bad either here, as I fully expect Queally to outlast Michelli here and find that knockout, like I said, either in the second or third round. Next up, we got Levin Chokeli going up against Sabah Homasi. Very intriguing matchup here, as Levin Chokeli originally was a very quick finisher with a lot of his regional tape, but as he's been making his way through the Bellator ranks, you see him utilizing his grappling and grinding opponents out, and also using his judo to throw fools on their head. Sabah Homasi is also a guy who's a kind of a quick finisher more often than not, has big power in his hands, but also has been working on his jiu-jitsu game, which has allowed him to pull off some submissions. However, I think that Chokeli is a far more well-rounded fighter here. He's the younger fighter as well, and I fully expect him to go out there, utilize his grappling to slow down Homasi, and then eventually get him out of there in the latter half of this matchup. So give me Chokeli and Chokeli inside the distance. Next up, we got Mads Burnell going up against Daniel Weichel. It should be loading up here real quick. I'm not sure what's taking so long. Let me just close the rest of these tabs and maybe that will help your boy out since I got so many open up. Here we go. Mads Burnell, Daniel Weichel. Daniel Weichel, probably the longest tenured Bellator fighter at this point in time. He's going up against Mads Burnell, who's obviously a BJJ wizard. I fully expect his wrestling to be too much for Weichel here, who may have the striking advantage, but I don't think it's so much so to the point that he's going to be able to knock out Mads Burnell. I think Mads will utilize his striking well enough to mask a takedown attempt, and then he should be able to just rinse and repeat over 50 minutes, grinding this fight out and picking up a decision victory. Next up, we got Sinead Kavanagh going up against Sarah Collins. Sarah Collins is obviously a judo black belt under Dan Kelly from Australia, and she showcased her judo chops last time around in her Bellator debut, where she was able to quickly get Pam Sorensen to the ground and utilize that armbar from scarfold position as judokas normally like to employ, and she was able to get the tap. But Sinead Kavanagh is going to be a little bit harder to get to the ground and try to implement that judo style. I fully expect Kavanagh to utilize her slugger type of approach, where she walks down Sarah Collins, puts her punches together, and really discourages Collins on the feet as she continues to land with ferocity. Obviously, once this fight hits the mat, things could get a little bit iffy, but I think Kavanagh has shown good enough submission defense and an ability to work back to her feet so that she can get back to her handiwork in terms of marching her opponents down and getting them out of there with strikes. So give me Sinead Kavanagh, and I think she wins this fight by decision, by outvoluming and outdamaging Sarah Collins. Next up, I believe this is the co-main event. Yes, it is. We got Erin Pico coming in as a massive favorite against Pedro Carvalho. Now, when I was doing the tape for this fight, I recognized that Pedro was the number 3 ranked featherweight in the Bellator roster when he went up against Jeremy Kennedy last time around. With all due respect, I think he is the least skilled fighter to ever be ranked number 3 or higher in any major MMA promotion. I don't think he's that good. He's decent all around. He has good enough output. He has a sneaky jiu-jitsu game at times as well. But I think he's going to be completely outmatched here against Erin Pico, who's really coming into his own at this point in time. I believe he's 7-1 over his last 8 fights, with his only loss coming to Jeremy Kennedy and that unfortunate fight where he had a shoulder injury that he was unable to fix in between rounds. Hence, the referee decided to stop the fight. But Pico is doing a great job in terms of mixing his power boxing, striking, crashing the pocket, and mixing in his clinch game and his wrestling, and just utilizing great cardio, great fight IQ, and just beating opponents pretty much at any, in any portion of the game. Like, no matter where the fight takes place, Erin Pico is always live to go out there and just insert his will and his dominance. And I'm expecting him to do the same thing here against Carvalho. I think he roughs him up over 15 minutes and wins this fight by decision. Main event time, and I appreciate you guys bearing with my voice, bearing with the fact that I'm doing this at 5 a.m. But I know you guys appreciate the fact that you're getting the breakdowns to begin with, albeit abbreviated. All right, main event here. We got the middleweight title on the line as we have, in my opinion, the best middleweight on the planet, Johnny Eblen, going up against Fabian Edwards. Now, I got to be honest, I was very surprised and impressed by the fact that Fabian Edwards was able to get his hand raised over a Gegard Mousasi last time around. He won that fight 49-46 on all judges' scorecards, but the intriguing thing about that was that all 3 judges gave Gegard Mousasi a different round, meaning that there is an argument that Mousasi could have won that fight as well, 3-2. But Edwards did a great job in terms of having a success in the striking round with landing some good damage, but also getting some good control time on the ground with his own takedowns. However, I think he has a monumental task here to go up and try to upset Johnny Eblen, who in my opinion is just a far superior fighter. Obviously, he has this wrestling background that he can lean on here to grind out Fabian Edwards, but also his hands are very impressive, and I think that he might be able